Hi, I'm Paul Dixon. Come on, Robin. Welcome to the fish house. I'm a collector. I'm a hoarder. My wife won't let us all go all fish, but we've incorporated a lot of different things. We put one of Amanda Switzer's and collaboration with Tim Borski. She put this together, the fish swimming up the mirror with broken glass. I always love collecting on all my adventures. A big collector of memorabilia. Hey you. No, Robin, don't you put it, go on in front, no. Come on, buddy. Anyway, and then we go down to the only work area that my dear wife will let me tie flies so it doesn't make a huge mess. And we created the fishing room that all the stuff over the years of my buddies that tie flies and just different books on fly fishing that I spent hours and hours reading. I loved any of the artwork that I could find about fishing and hunting. And Tim Borski up here, John Rice, we'd go fishing and they'd paint stuff, or they'd say, oh, you gotta have one of these. Then I had my, all my fly tying buddies, when Lefty came years ago, and we spent, a lot of time on the flats, and Lefty always like, what can I get you, Paul? And it's like, Lefty, I'd love to just have some of your flies that you've tied. So Bob Popovic's, this was on the front cover, I think, of Fly Tire magazine about 25 years ago. And, he was a dear friend and, just loved Bobby. We spent a lot of time out in the water. Tim Borski, when he came up here to fish the redbone tournaments, he sat down and tied all his Borski flies, the Chernobyl crab and the sliders and everything. And this was a cool little thing. This is, one day Roger Waters calls me and says, mate, what, you smoke a little? And I go, what? And he says, I found something, you gotta see this. And so he brings out the next week, he said, I'll bring it next week. And it was a little blown glass striper. Just so happens it was a pipe, but really cool. That's Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. I tried to collect, stuff. These are skin mounts of the striped bass. They're not a fiberglass reproduction. They were done by artists years ago in the real taxidermy way. So when I saw this one, I thought, wow, that's really cool. And all the books that I've collected and from friends and from, just trying to learn the sport through the past, 30, 40 years. This is my dad's old tackle box that he had made, which was really cool. It was just a really cool box that he had made. All old junk that he used to troll with, but it's just a beautifully made box. I always loved that type of thing. Same thing with this. This is an old stretcher box, and it's actually in the movie Looking Through Water as a prop, because when we shot the movie, they didn't have anything fishing related for the house that William, the character, lived in. This was an old hippie woodworker in the Keys that used local woods. And so I kept driving by it and I needed a stretcher box. It was just beautiful, the wood handle and how he made this thing. And the woods that he used were all the local woods that he found in the Keys. And in those days you'd use, keep everything stretched in your leaders and stuff. You don't see it much anymore. It's all changed because the how you fish for them has sort of changed. They don't go through all the knots and everything that we used to, biminis and, and how the rigging in the old days was done. So it's changed, materials have changed. A lot of the things are, fished a lot of redbone tournaments, and in those days they gave away paintings of famous artists and stuff as prizes. There was no cash in it. It was a charity tournament started by Gary Ellis. That's what Looking Through Water Bob based the book on, was the redbone tournaments. So a lot of these are the paintings that I've collected are just from the tournaments that we did up here and in the Keys and in the different areas that they held them. A lot of these pictures are just old friends. The first time I met Andy Mill, and we did the first BTT dinner in New York City. False Albacore, my buddy Tim Borski, I spent a lot of time in the Keys with, and a lot of time up here. Every place I go, I try to collect a little something. This is from Shine's conch shack in Andros, and Shine would carve stuff in his spare time out of conch, so I thought this is really cool. I got to get me a Shine tarpon carved. This is Ian Davis. He's a fantastic artist, so he would do these for the Red Bone and auction them off, and it was always a great cause. This is a tarpon scale from Nathaniel Linville. He wanted to catch a world's record tarpon, and I believe it was on 6-pound test. And so he said, hey, you mind if we go out and go tarpon fishing? And said, yeah, we'll try it. Let's give it a try. So we go out there, and right away he hooks this fish, and I think at the time it was 80 pounds was the record. This looked like it was gonna beat it, and he hooks it. I miss it with the gaff the first time, because it comes in pretty hot or whatever. So we ended up losing it, but that was the beginning of his quest. Then 10 years later, he finally, with Steve Huff, he broke that record, and he calls me one day, and I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm on my way to have my tarpon, mounted or whatever. And about a month later, he sends me one of the scales, and it was like, well, I began this journey with you, and I ended up with Steve. So a tournament that we won down years ago in the Ocean Reef Club with Adelaide Scobell, and Adelaide was a dear friend. We won the tournament 2 years in a row with her. First of all, these are Joe Blados. When I first met Joe, this is probably 30 years ago, he came in, and he was the fly tyer, invented the crease fly that has now become one of the big flies. And this is a whole collection, which is really cool because he tied everything himself. Photograph here is of one of the blitzes underneath the Montauk light that Jim Levinson took. And in the old days, lots of surf casters. Because of the lack of the striper now, you don't see as many surf casters, but it was an event in the fall that brought everybody from all over Long Island to surf cast Montauk. These are all old Popovic's flies that we actually used. One of the Pop Lips flies that we used to test in my pool, when he first came out with this fly, he would trim it, and Bobby wouldn't go in the pool, so Nick Curcione and I would jump in the pool, and he'd pull it so we could look at it and see how it wiggles, and then he'd bring it up and he'd trim the lip a little bit until we'd say, oh, that's perfect, and it would, wiggle right and do it. Bobby was one of my favorite people and a dear friend, so I always tried to sort of preserve his work and not use it. I caught so many fish on this thing, and it's all rusted out now, but this is one of the first hollow flies that he came up with, and we used this for teasing in the early days a lot. Greatest saltwater fly tyer of our generation by far, and how many people he taught and his methods, and he was just a wonderful person. I think this is the trophy that Bob Rich, who was the author of Looking Through Water, and Tim Borski and I won the year we won the tournament. This is a painting that John Alexander, who's a dear friend, and he was a great artist, and he was best friends with Jimmy Buffett. So they signed this, and I just love the painting, and his work was great. Anything to make memories from the areas that I went to or sort of explored and stuff. So it's been a fun ride. So I'm Paul Dixon, this is my fish house, and thanks for letting me show you around. It's been a pleasure.